The concepts I have presented relate to direct play, and now I will start describing those associated with a more indirect approach to competition. Before doing so, I'd like to emphasize the importance of ball circulation when the opponent is more passive, does not apply aggressive pressing, and is not manipulated by the attraction with the ball. In such cases, it is much harder to advance the ball through the opponent's lines, as opponents remaining in their zone maintain appropriate distances from each other. Therefore, our players should be capable of creating relationships that allow maintaining possession of the ball while moving the opponent's structure. The process of moving the ball aims to create a situation where one or more opponents are slow to react, creating space through which the ball can be advanced. Regardless of the structure in which our team plays, we can distinguish two methods of ball circulation. The first is perimeter circulation, and the second is circulation in which the ball occasionally enters the opponent's structure. Personally, I prefer the second method, although the first one is safer. The concept I'd like to focus on at this point is the so-called inverted fullback. The inverted fullback is a player positioned as a fullback who has a profile allowing him to function effectively within the opponent's structure. This is a defender whom I classify as a playmaker, capable of creating numerical superiority in the central area of the field. Depending on the way the attack is conducted, he can perform various functions. One of them is to mimic the role of the second holding midfielder in the Christmas tree concept. However, primarily this player is tasked with operating in the lower half space, creating an additional passing line or drawing the opponent's attention, which leads to the isolation of the winger from the opponent and allows him to start individual actions through dribbling. I'd like to mention that I very much enjoy using players in this position whose dominant foot is opposite to the side they play on. This allows for additional opportunities to shield and protect the ball, which is received into the opponent's structure. An action derived from this type of ball reception is the switching play. In the case of wanting to play with one touch, the fullback can perform an individual action commonly known as the Italian trick. A decade or two ago, playmakers were mainly considered to be players in the midfield position. Today, when referring to a playmaker, it's more about the player's profile than his role. However, it must be acknowledged that the role of the game creator in modern football is mainly assigned to central defenders, who are increasingly starting the team's attack. Aggressive pressure from opponents doesn't allow central defenders to have much time with the ball, but the situation is quite different when the opponent is more passive. Central defenders then have the opportunity to explore options to be used over a longer period. It also happens that there is considerable space to exploit between them and the opponents. In my game idea, there is a principle of progression when there's a frontal space which primarily refers to the central defenders who build the play. It's worth mentioning that eliminating the space between most widely positioned defenders and the opponent's forwards allows for the use of another element in the game, attracting the opponent by extending the effective playing space. The idea is that initially, the player with the ball should quickly reduce the available space, and then his partner in the line should move towards the space in the direction of his own goalkeeper. This type of behavior is referred to in my game idea as extending the effective playing space to entice the opponent into starting the press. Most teams have a principle that triggers pressing actions when the opponent passes the ball towards his own goal. Implementing this type of space extension and passing the ball backward can influence the opponent's decision on subsequent pressing actions. However, this is only achievable if the previous action has successfully realized progression on the field. In conveying methods of indirect space attacking, the concept of squares plays a key role. It allows players to easily understand which spaces to occupy in the game and where to direct the ball. I usually present the concept of squares to my players using a specific opponent's game structure. I particularly like to use the 1-4-4-2 system because its structure allows for the identification of 3 horizontal lines and 4 vertical lines. These lines create an opportunity to identify 4 squares, which I use to illustrate to players the spaces within the opponent's structure. The first square refers to the space between the forwards and the central midfielders of the opponent. The next 2 squares are created by the fullback, winger, central defender and central midfielder. These spaces, in theory, are placed within the half spaces. The third square is formed by the central defenders and central midfielders. In theory, these spaces take the form of squares, but in practice they can have a completely different shape. My players learn positional play using the concept of squares, but they understand that their final shape depends on the positioning of specific opponents on the field. In advanced stages of understanding this concept, players should be able to interpret the available spaces around them without relying on information about the opponent's system or specific positions of their adversaries. The discussed space between a group of opposing players can be utilized in various ways. One way to use this space is illustrated by the first square. This space is mainly explored by the holding midfielder who plays closest to the defenders. In my idea of the game, this player is commonly referred to as the 6. Primarily, this player maintains a central position within the square's space. Thus, we can say that the space of the square is consistently occupied as the functioning of this player takes place precisely within it. The player performing the role of the 6, similar to anyone else playing between the lines, should be characterized by a high level of spatial control or scanning. Moreover, he should be able to manage his body position and collaborate with the player in possession of the ball, considering which foot will be used for passing and receiving the ball. Receiving the ball between the lines with separation from the opponent allows the player to progress in the game. This enables him to attract the opponent's attention. It is essential to note that after passing the ball to the higher position players, it's crucial to locate the nearest opponents. When creating goal-scoring situations, his assistance might be necessary and he will become one of those responsible for marking the opponents. The concept of marking in attack refers to players positioned closest to their own goal, while their teammates focus on creating goal-scoring opportunities. The task of the player executing marking in attack is to locate and cover the opponent, which prepares him for actions in case of losing possession of the ball. This concept facilitates more effective defense during an opponent's counterattack, improving its elimination. It is one of the elements of my idea of the game during attacking. Another way to use the space is illustrated by the second square. An attacking player playing as a forward drops from his initial position to receive the ball in this square. I want to emphasize once again the importance of extending the effective space of the game before dropping from the initial position. Not only does this allow for more space and time when receiving the ball, but it also focuses the opponent's attention, which will eventually follow the player. In such a situation, dropping from the initial position will be vertical. The player moving to the central part of the square's space will receive the ball in a close position and under pressure from the opponent. Ineffective execution of this process can lead to losing possession of the ball and starting a counter-attack by the opponent. Therefore, it's crucial to remember the technique of releasing the ball in a close position. When discussing with other coaches, I have heard various opinions about playing in a closed position. I have heard that the best solution for a player receiving the ball under pressure is to try to deceive the opponent and turn with the ball. In my opinion, this approach is too risky relative to its benefits. So I believe that a much smoother process is to pass the ball to a partner positioned one line lower. In the next action, the player receiving the ball will be able to make a pass beyond the last line of the opponent, and the player who initially passed the ball, after unmarking himself from the protection with a circular movement, will receive it in a frontal position towards the opponent's goal. If the entire action happens lower on the field and doesn't involve a forward, but for example a midfielder, the midfielder can receive a return pass and start progressing while facing the opponent's goal. In the training process, it's valuable to focus on methods of unmarking oneself from the opponent's pressure. One of these methods is unmarking with a circular movement. When communicating with players, I convey that I have nothing against attempts to turn with the ball in a close position under pressure, but I believe this should be an occasional action. This means it is executed so infrequently that the opponent doesn't expect it, which increases the chances of success. A similar method of using space can occur in the area of the third square, as depicted in the graphic. Despite the effective extension of the playing space by the attacking player, it may happen that the nearest opponent doesn't decide to follow him. In that case, this player will be able to receive the ball in the center of the space without opposition, just as a player who constantly functions between the opponent's lines can also receive the ball without opposition. In my idea of the game, this role is performed by the attacking midfielder, commonly referred to by me as the number 10. Thanks to the work done by the forward, focusing the attention of the nearest opponent, the attacking midfielder can operate in the space similarly to the 6, but position one line higher. Therefore, the ability to scan the space should be a characteristic feature of the player in this role. He should also be able to control his body position and move on to playing with the ball as quickly as possible, facing the opponent's goal. A player constantly operating within a specific group of opponents should manage his position so that he is always as far as possible from each of them. Just like the 6, the 10 should collaborate with the player passing the ball so that both use the correct foot for passing and receiving the ball. The opposite of vertically dropping into the square's space is horizontally running into it. This is a solution proposed by Spanish coach Mikel Arteta, who believes that a winger should initially position himself wide and only in the next phase of the action run into the space. This type of run into space allows the player to receive the ball while running and in a body position that enables him to continue the attack towards the opponent's goal without needing to rotate his body. Introducing the ball into the center of an unoccupied space where the passer's partner is supposed to run at the same moment the ball arrives is a highly complex and difficult task to execute. This process relates to managing space with minimal control. Thus, the timing of actions is crucial for the successful execution of tasks by the players. Cooperating players must maintain constant communication, both verbal and non-verbal. I believe that the importance of using the correct foot by the passer and the receiver is key. Both the passer and the receiver should use the foot closer to the sideline on the side where these actions take place. The last way of utilizing space that I present in my game idea concerns the diagonal nature of the pass. This refers to moving the ball from one half space to the other and is most often associated with bringing the ball from the lower part of the field to the upper part. A diagonal pass over such a long distance and the cooperation of partners positioned at extreme ends allows the ball to be received in a body position facing the opponent's goal. The distance between the passer and the receiver requires support from other teammates who impact the opponents in the space between the main actors of the action. This support mainly relates to actions aimed at distracting the opponents in such a way that they are unable to block the path of the moving ball. Similar to the previously presented way of utilizing the squares space, in this case as well, both players should use the foot closer to the sidelines of the sides they are playing on. The inspiration for this type of utilization of the second squares space was Polish coach Janusz Niedźwiedź, in whose game idea the so-called diagonals function.